many of the parents and teachers and principals, when we have our meetings at the school level, are talking more about how do they deal with these furlough days, and feeling like they really didn't have a say or a choice in this, that this is what was given to us and we had to decide whether or not we wanted the furlough days or another scary monster, which would have probably been the schools closing down, or all of this kind of stuff. So they felt like they only had two choices, which was yes or no, and it wasn't basically speaking to the people at the school level saying, how can we work this out, and give us some suggestions and some ideas. So in speaking with some of them, and remembering what we learn in committee on a year-to-year basis, I heard some of the things like 5% is administration, 95% is student support currently. I heard 40% is reduction in central. How many teachers are there teaching in a classroom versus not teaching in a classroom?
That's my question.
Okay.
If you're talking about the resource teachers, we probably have a total of a little under 500 that may not be in the classroom there at the district level. We have about, I think, 50 at the state level, and the rest are with complex areas that deliver special education, reading, math, instruction, and help the teachers at that.
Okay. 500, and how many are at the school level? Like in classrooms?
Excuse me, Mr. Taguchi says we have 400, because he and I traded numbers. 400, I stand on his. We have probably
400.
about 12,000 teachers in the classroom.
12,000 teachers in the classroom. The 12,000 teachers in the classroom would be like they have their own classroom.
They either have their own classroom, or they may be sharing classrooms when teachers have prep time.
Okay. Like, because I didn't follow closely in regards to programs and what kind of programs. When parents are taking a look at this, they're looking at how furloughs being the last option, but I'm hearing through Superintendent that wasn't your first option.
No, I said that wouldn't have been our first choice.
Yeah, okay,
Well,
that wouldn't have been your first choice. Okay, so that wouldn't have been your first choice. So what would have been your first choices?
A full school year like we have.
Right. But then how would have you been able to?
We couldn't.
Okay, sorry, is that your first choice given the budget that you have now, is to furlough?
After going through a whole lot of discussions and spending days and more days, and looked at every possible way we could do it and however we could package it, it was a decision that we agreed that would be in the best interest so that we could preserve as much as we could of the instructional time. When we do our budget, the first thing we look at in our priority order is to preserve learning time. Then you take a look at what is required by law, and we go through this every year, and health and safety, and then what programs. So we looked at everything, and it was a hard decision. It was not a decision that came. I think we had more gnashing of the teeth of something that we did not want to, but given the fact that this is the dollars that we have, and we want to ensure that we can provide so that when the teachers come to school, their class size won't be too large.
Mm-hmm.
Their class size would be something that they could manage, that they would have the supports they have. Right now, they still have their part-time teacher supports. We still are able to run for the 4 days that we're there on non-furlough weeks, a full complement of what we need to provide for schools. We looked at all the different, like we said, possible ways, and I can see Will is reflecting on all the things that we did, and it was probably one of the hardest choices, because we happen to believe very much in the kids in the future. And yet at the same time, there's only so many dollars that we have, and we have to keep the operation going.
So what you're saying right now is everything that is funded was priority over choosing instructional days?
No, it was included with.
Help me understand that.
In running a school system, teachers are one part of the equation. They are the most important part because they have direct contact. But you need to take all the other supports that you need to run a school. So you're going to need custodians to keep the buildings going, to keep it clean. You're going to need to have your supports for your, your part-time teachers that help the teachers in the classroom. You're gonna need your clerical staff to run it. You're gonna need your bus drivers, your cafeteria. Somebody's gotta mow the lawn, even though we've reduced it, so now it has to be up to your waist before we cut it. You still need to do the lawn. Now, behind the scenes, which, many people perhaps don't think about, but we take care of all the contracts. We make sure that the schools get the supplies and, that they request, the goods that get delivered. We make sure that the salaries get paid, that the leaves go through, the substitutes get there. So there's a lot of back room. Oh, by the way, we also got to pay our bills, and we got to make sure we comply with the federal requirements of reporting. So there's a lot that goes on behind so that teachers can teach in the classroom. And so when you take a look at the organization and what we're going to do so that teachers can teach, then it's preserving learning time, but what do we have to do to be sure that all the other pieces are there to help ensure that the learning time is going? So it's never one priority over another. It's how do we comprehensively, holistically make it work so that teachers can teach.
Understand, but it's a question where parents are asking, especially asking me, that when you're taking a look at all the different expenditures in a school, basically you're coming down to an answer. Our answer to them is that everything that is funded currently in the school system is more important than instructional days.
No, it's equally so that we can have instructional days.
Correct. I hear what you're saying in regards to equally. But I do believe that at the school level, principals as well as teachers feel that before you actually went to the furlough option, that there were probably other things that could have been looked at. And I think that that's what many are frustrated about.
Representative Finnegan, we looked at all the administrative services, and if we shut down the entire Department of Education back office, all of the central services, everything, that still would not have made up the debt that we owe for our restriction.
And then that would bring the second thing, I guess, which is why not the non-instructional days? Why not looking at some of those things, parents and principals and teachers, because one of the things that the teachers were saying was, we are now given the same amount of work in less amount of days, and we're going to have to do all of this other work to be able to, because they're not going to say, I'm not going to provide this instruction to my kids. So you're basically, from what I'm understanding from these teachers, they're basically saying, I'm doing the same amount of work anyway. But they weren't able to speak into that conversation.
If I can answer that.
Yes.
From a non-answer position, and I can assure you, I was not involved in any of the negotiation sessions, so I'm probably the best person to answer this question. How we arrived at the 17 instructional days is not something that we can freely discuss, because it is the content of a confidential discussion as they go through negotiations. I can tell you that from, I think, many people's perspectives, number one, there are opportunities for schools on a school-by-school basis to convert those days, to convert those furlough days to the non-instructional days versus the instructional days. But that is a school-based decision. Every school has different needs. Some schools are in the process of implementing new interventions where they may need those non-instructional days to fully do the staff training, to look at the assessments, to determine which kids needs which interventions, those kind of things. You have other schools that may be at the tail end of their implementation, so they can maybe focus more time on teaching.